Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Predators, in which the Sharks managed to win 2-1 in the shootout. So they've gotten their revenge on the Predators for the Predators' earlier win this season over the Sharks 5-2. And this was a pretty hard-fought game for the San Jose Sharks compared to their previous 2 wins against the Blackhawks and the Wild, where they dominated early, or in the case of the Blackhawks game, dominated the majority of the game, but really just sort of that gave up, I guess you could say, or just took their foot off the gas in the last few minutes in the Chicago case, or the last couple of periods in the Wild case, and let those teams come back into it. This one, there was nothing like that. The Sharks skated for close to, if not the entirety of these 65 minutes that they did play. They were against a tough Predators team who were looking for revenge after they were just absolutely slaughtered by the Avalanche in their previous game, and the Sharks held their own. They got this into overtime. They earned the extra point with the shootout victory, and it was just an all-around solid win for the Sharks. Now, this was a game that started off 0-0 for a very long time before it would be Philip Forsberg who would break free with a late-ish second period goal to put the Predators up 1-0, and it was looking like maybe we could have a game literally end in a 1-0 score, but it would be Tomas Hertl who would get the game-tying goal, and that would be enough to send it into the overtime. And we can recall the Sharks' first overtime of the year against the Buffalo Sabres, which was, let's just say, not pretty, but this one here tonight was a lot better. The Sharks did get their fair share of chances. Saros made some pretty big saves, and it ended up being a 1 minute and 31 second power play to end the overtime for the Predators after Kane went off for hooking, and the Sharks kept the puck out of the net, and they got this into shootout before a 6-round scoreless shootout. And it would be Timo Meier in the 7th round who would end the game and get the extra point for the Sharks. Now, the first thing to talk about would be Martin Jones, who was the hero in this game, and a great rebound from his lackluster performance against the Minnesota Wild in the previous one, as he manages to outduel UC Saros, who in his own right was very, very strong here. And Jones made some big saves in these first 3 periods. You could say that he maybe could have had this Forsberg one, but it's hard to give him much criticism in this one. And I think his biggest save certainly came in the last few seconds of the overtime with the Predators on the power play. Philip Forsberg, with this scramble in front, gets this puck. He goes for the shot, and there's so much traffic in front. I have no idea how Jones manages to see this puck, but he makes a huge glove save, and it eventually gets into the overtime, or into the shootout, where Jones makes 7 saves on these Predators players. And it's not like the Predators don't have some very skilled players in the shootout. Johansson, Forsberg, Duchesne, even someone like Rocco Grimaldi, who took a shot in this one, while he's not the best when it comes to 5-on-5 due to his size, is a very, very skilled player, and yet he stands up to the shots of Duchesne and Grimaldi. He stands up to he follows Ellis with his deke, and he actually makes a huge save with a poke check on Ryan Johansson, who is, has that tendency to slow the puck down in the slot and try and go for a shifty deke, sort of like what Patrick Kane likes to do as well. So Jones doing his homework in that situation, and he outduels Saros to earn the Sharks this extra point. Definitely a lot of credit has to go to him for this game, and maybe all, or the majority of the credit even. Next, I will talk about Tomas Hertl, who got the only goal for the Sharks, or at least the only goal that counts for the Sharks in this game, and he has quietly been having a pretty solid season offensively. I was surprised to hear this when they announced that this was now Hertl's 18th point on the year. That puts him at actually a point per game pace, 18 games, 18 points, and Hertl was the Sharks' best forward last season, or at least arguably the Sharks' best forward last season, and he's been having now another strong offensive year, and this is pretty surprising just because of how the season started for Hertl, as well as the entirety of the San Jose Sharks, where Hertl wasn't really doing all that much in the first 4 or 5 games of the year, but he certainly has brought it back in these last 13, and those 18 points are helping the Sharks out a lot as of late. Next, I will talk about Radim Shemek, as the Sharks now move to 3-0 in this new Radim Shemek era. He has a fantastic game here tonight. He was very good against the Blackhawks. He was okay against the Wild, and he was very, very good here against the Predators, and just giving such a solid option for the San Jose Sharks. Yes, Dillon was pretty good in this role, but you have to say that Shemek in this short time span has likely even been better, which is a lot to say, as Dillon has looked pretty decent in the role. Dillon now moved on to that third pairing. Shemek doing such a great job of being a calming presence with Brent Burns, has transitioned seamlessly into the penalty kill, doesn't look like he's lost any sort of step, even after a pretty devastating injury last season that kept him out for so long. And so Radim Shemek has really just been a sort of a godsend here, I know is the joke, for the Sharks defense, and while it didn't necessarily go too well in the game against Minnesota, it goes very, very well here against a strong offensive team. Reminder that the Predators have the second most goals scored in the league, and I believe coming into the day before the Capitals played, they had the best goal scoring in the league. So a good game for the Sharks, the defense and the goaltending as a whole, to keep the Predators to only a single goal. Finally, I will mention Tim Heed, who drew into the lineup due to Mario Ferraro. He was a game-time decision after he took a big hit from the Wild defenseman Dumba last game. He ends up not drawing into the lineup. It's Tim Heed who comes in, and Tim Heed surprisingly impressed me in this one. Probably his best game of the season. Played close to 14 minutes on a pairing with Brendan Dillon, and normally what I expect from Heed is either absolutely nothing besides a couple of blocked shots, like his own shots getting blocked, or some disastrous pinches that lead to great chances the other way. But actually, Heed was solid defensively in this game. He made a lot of strong pinches that managed to keep the offense alive for the Sharks, or get the offense going for the Sharks in the neutral zone to quickly pass it back up forward. And so it's an interesting situation where DeBoer is in, where, we know DeBoer loves to play those left-handed defensemen with right-handed defensemen, and with Ferraro and Dillon being the best options for the Sharks prior to this game, he had to go with the two left-handed defensemen. But with Heed showing a big performance in this one, it's possible that Dillon actually remains with Heed going into the following game on Tuesday. And we've seen DeBoer actually pull something like this with the Sharks, and you only have to look back a couple years where it was Joachim Ryan who played multiple games with Brent Burns until he went down with a pretty brief injury, and Paul Martin stepped back into the lineup. Martin then remained in the lineup even with Joachim Ryan healthy all the way into the playoffs, where he made that disastrous mistake and Ryan eventually drew in for the last couple of games. So it'll be interesting to see if he'd actually manages to take this spot with Ferraro likely healthy enough to play on Tuesday. And it would be pretty tragic, I guess you could say, because Ferraro has had a pretty good year, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Heed back in the lineup. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action, as I said, on Tuesday. They will host the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers themselves have been having a pretty solid season, certainly a very, very top-heavy team, and so the Sharks will need to be ready with their defense against, the top line of the Oilers with McDavid, with Draisaitl, with James Neal, who has surprisingly been strong this season. Jones will have to have a repeat performance of tonight's game, as I suspect he will get that one. And the Sharks will be looking for their fourth win in a row, as they inch ever so closer to that 500 record, now sitting at 7-10-1. Class dismissed.